And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Benched with Bubba, episode 789, part 3 of our 2025 Projections Review. We've done the overachievers, the underachievers. Again, that's probably not the right way to phrase it, but here we are. Today, we're doing some listener questions and some, kind of a little bit of both over and underachievers that might surprise or at least, get some curiosity going as you get ready for 2026. We'll do all that and more. But first off, you can find me on Twitter at BDentric and my co-host, as always, on Twitter at BreakingBen_T. Ben Tid, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well, Bubba. Yeah, you kind of identified what we did so far pretty accurate. I guess the one way I'd say it is that the first episode was the most accurately projected hitters, and then the second episode was more of the ones that they tended to overperform because we took away those that were below 400 plate appearance, 400 at bats. So if you, in the case of like Jordan Alvarez, he was a big miss on projections, but he got hurt. So we didn't really want to go for those beach balls that are hanging out there.
Yes, those beach balls that are hanging out there, that is for sure. Just one little Patreon plug. Ben dropped an awesome article that you guys can go check out. It was kind of his second half rendition of his first half work on basically how bad we are at drafting is the nicest way I'll say it. If you want to just give us the literal, briefest headline of what it is, and they can go read it, of course, but breaking down, projections versus player rate or finish, ADP, all that good stuff. So you have a lot going on in there. It's really good stuff.
I'm glad you think so. Yeah, it was a pretty lengthy Word doc that I sent to you and Ryan. And Ryan Bloomfield was the one who ended up tweeting out the link to the Patreon article. But of course, you have to be a member of Bubba and Ryan's Patreon to read the article. But yeah, just a little high level overview of what I talked about. Really, what I did was I took the main event ADP and I converted it into a auction value or a dollar value. I did that using values that Ariel Cohen tweeted out a couple years ago. I don't know if he's ever updated the values. I doubt they would have to get updated, but you never know. So maybe a little outdated, but I think they get the job done. And I compared it to the Razzball player rater dollar values, and I looked up, okay, what was each hitter's ADP dollar value, then what did they actually perform per Razzball? And I looked at the biggest underachievers, overachievers, kind of similar vein of what we're doing here with the projections, but just a different way of looking at it, looking at ADP primarily. I broke it out by position at a Patreon member's request. I looked back at 2023 and 2024 to see how if there's any trends that carried through this year, looking back at the previous two seasons. One thing is that Razzball doesn't go back that far in terms of what they archive for 15-team dollar values, so I had to use Fangraphs. That was a little tricky trying to get it to line up the best I could with Razzball's rating. But yeah, I didn't go as into the player depth like I did at the All-Star break version, but I did more of a bigger trend look, which I think is probably easier to comprehend, because if you get in the weeds of players, it gets a little monotonous after a while because also there's so many of them. But I did look at certain players in certain rounds depending on things I noticed. But yeah, if you're a Patreon listener and you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. Not because I just wrote it, but I think it could be valuable. And if you're not a member, maybe consider joining just to see some of the stuff that's over on the Patreon.
There you go. It's a lot of good stuff over there. A lot more to come as we start getting back into 2026 mode. But enough of that. Let's talk about the listeners, what they wanted on these players to discuss via the projections. So I'm going to start with the Discord first, Ben, and then we'll get to the Twitter responses as well. And we will start with all the way top here. Adam W. gives us Elliot Ramos. He said he hit his numbers basically, but it's kind of bland. Anything more here? So when we look at Mr. Ramos on the old sheet here, Ramos was the 104th projected hitter, finished 78th at the position, so a nice little bump there. Projected for 486 at bats, though, got 620. So he's one of those nice bumps in plate appearances, essentially, that helped the projections. But he was projected for 20 homers at 21, 66 RBIs, drove in 69. Steals are almost dead on. He really outperformed batting average and runs scored, Ben. So it's a good name to start with, I think, because a lot of people were kind of bored with Elliot Ramos. Felt more like a 15 team than a 12 teamer. He kind of took a step back from what we saw in 2024. But when you look at Elliot Ramos's production, what does anything stand out to you to maybe to get us excited for 2026?
Yes, this one's a little tricky. So he was projected for 20 home runs and he got 21, but it took him 134 more at bats to get there. So that's a little upsetting. I did have Ramos in a couple spots, I think, at least one. And there was a stretch where I was actually sitting him, and that was a 15-team league late in the year because he wasn't really hitting homers, wasn't stealing. And I think just saying how close his homers and steals were to the projections when he had so many more at bats kind of, I guess, it kind of supports why I would sit him, because for a while it was just nothing. Maybe it was some empty average, and then there's like a stretch where he was just slumping. So it was a mixed season, but despite those negatives, he still finished 20 spots higher, 25, 26 spots higher for my Z scores as a hitter than he was projected for. So I guess by outperforming in 20 runs, that's a pretty good amount. And the average was still pretty solid despite the slumps that Ramos had. So I don't know. It's a little concerning that the rate stats decreased, and the fact that he needs the volume to make up for that isn't always ideal. I'm not gonna say he's an accumulator Ramos, but it's just interesting. It's an interesting case where the rate stats or the pace declined for him based on projections, but he ended up performing better overall. So I don't know how. I think it's one of those fluky things where it's going to happen. I'm not really sure. For next year, though, it sounds like his ADP is kind of starting out where it was last year, around pick 200 maybe, which could be a value again if he hits top of the lineup.
Yeah, I'm interested in him for a couple reasons. Like we saw the big 2024 in the 121 games was getting like some rookie. He was never going to win rookie of the year. At least he got some buzz in that regard. So there's a lot of optimism going into 2025. When I looked at his page more, like his strikeout rate dropped 3.5%. The BABIP dropped 20 points, which is not a lot, but it does impact it. But then you go deeper, like he had his career best max EV of 116. This is where it's perplexing because I did watch a lot of Elliot Ramos, but his barrel rate dropped to 8.8% from 14.5. Hard hit rate was the same at 47.4. So that works. Ground ball rate, fly ball rate, very similar. Home run to fly ball dropped about 5 percentage points. That's a big drop from 17.3 to 11.9. So you dig even deeper, and this is one of those cases where he's still young, so the jury's out on who Elliot Ramos is at the plate. But you look into like his plate discipline metrics. The dude in the zone swung about 7.5% less, which is a lot when it adds up over time. Just swinging in general is a couple percentage points less, but he made a lot more contact, or not a lot. He made like a 6% more contact, which is a good amount. If you look at him, his swinging strike rate dropped 3%, but his called strike went up almost 3%. So what I'm trying to say out is he was way patient at the plate, like very patient at the plate. And some of these guys, we've talked about it time and time again, like, yeah, strikeouts are bad, but in this era of baseball, sometimes you just got to get aggressive. Like you need, and I watched Elliott a lot. Like it almost felt like pitchers knew just groove on the first pitch he's taking it. Like just groove one. And it sets you behind in the count. So then your at bats are always different. Again, super young. That's just only his first full season. He's about 1.5 seasons. So to me, the jury's still out. Maybe somewhere in between this, per se. Who knows? But I think it's a lot of if the aggressiveness ticks back and now he's not a 22% K, but he's back to 25, 26. Does that boost things? Maybe, maybe not. But I would personally like to see him stop taking so many strikes. If he's going to improve the contact the way he did, we'll swing the bat more. This is what I want to see. So again, young ball player. We'll see where he goes with this. New coaching staff's going to come in. We'll see how that gets analyzed and everything. But when I look at Elliot Ramos, it's like a tale of two different players so far. Which one's he going to be in year 3 is a really big question. And sadly, I don't know if any of us know that answer.
There's one more thing. I don't think you mentioned his splits. So one of the reasons I was kind of hesitant to go in on Ramos, at least during DC season, was because he was so much better versus lefties in 2024. He had a season OPS of 792, but versus lefties it was 1193, and then versus righties it was 675. So he was kind of looking like he could maybe end up becoming a short side platoon bat. Maybe not in 2025, but in his career if he didn't turn things around. So I guess he made improvements, but overall his OPS went from 790 roughly to 728. But his splits were much closer. So he was 746 versus lefties, 725 versus righties. So it increased versus righties, but unfortunately he didn't stay as good versus lefties. So that's kind of interesting to see. But if he can continue to get the OPS up versus righties, I think he's gonna get better too. It's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because on the small sample, I remember he had that quote unquote lefty masher philosophy. Like they'd lead him off versus lefties this past year for a lot of the season, and then put him down in the order versus righties. So yeah, again, a lot. It's hard to get like a definitive stance on a young player. So I don't know where to actually go with Elliott. For now, he's a staple piece of that team. Like they want him out there every day, pretty much. So we'll have to see where that plays out. But again, if the splits continue to get goofy, we'll have to wait and see. All right, let's scroll through here. We don't. We could talk. Well, we don't have Matt Boyd for projections because he's a pitcher. But any initial thoughts on Matt Boyd? Because I'm staying far, far away with that innings increase.
I guess it depends on the ADP. If
Yeah.
people pay for the full year, then I probably won't be having Matt Boyd next year.
Yeah, so we do not know that answer just yet. All right, Ben Bingham got Ben to make a whole nother spreadsheet today, which is always great to see. Ben Bingham says, "How much stock do you put in projections for prospects?" This is a good question because Ben, being a projections kind of you follow them pretty closely, and a lot of guys do that. Most projection systems don't like young players. It goes back to how do you project a guy converting from the minors to the bigs? They like sample sizes and all these things that you just don't have when it comes to prospects. So Ben asks, like, are there any, like, first off, like, how do you, we'll do it one at a time. How much stock do you put in projections for prospects?
Usually not a lot because they're always pretty bad for the most part. Uh, I guess that's why you have people that are very high on projections tend to fade prospects. I know Ryan's that way. You don't use projections as much as maybe Ryan and I. Well, I think you started using Ryan's tracker during the offseason last year. So maybe you were seeing what the projections of a prospect may do to your team, the way it looks. But so we'll probably go through some players since we're on the topic. So they can be accurate. The real issue though is the projected at bats, which is something we've been commenting about a lot with these last few episodes when we're doing the projections review. Is we have the column that kind of filters out for players who are within 50 at bats of their projection, just to see, okay, how accurate was the projection in terms of skills within the playing time. But for example, Chase Mydroth, who had the most at bats of the players who debuted this year, he had 254 projected at bats, but he had 450. So right off the bat there, you're off by 200 at bats. So you kind of have to more look at a rate type projection and then hope that the playing time follows. So it's tough. If you're going to draft a team like a DC, for example, and you're tracking your projections for like a 8th percentile target, taking a rookie relatively early is going to hurt your team projection because unless they're, I don't know who would have a monster projection as a rookie going forward. Now I'd have to go back and try to look at previous projection systems to see who they really liked as rookies, but it's probably not going to fit for the price you're paying in terms of the dollar value. Go figure out after talking about it in the Patreon article. So it's if you're a projection drafter, you're probably not going to like how it's looking for your team if you take a rookie.
Completely agree. And like to your Mydroth point is, like you said, he led with 450 at bats. So basically, no player had more than 450 at bats, and that was the number we were using to differentiate at one point on the regular projections. So that's why we didn't talk about a whole lot of them outside of that first baseman in Sacramento. Nick Kurtz. I had to kind of keep the running gag going for a second, but
I chuckled.
Yeah, but it just goes to show you, like, and it's kind of like what I mentioned last show. Like the reason why so many catchers are on the list is because a lot of projection systems have a tough time like qualifying who plays DH because some of these guys get so many DH or first base at bats per se. So when it comes to prospects, it's like you don't know when they're going to get called up. Are they going to play every day? So on and so forth. There's always the surprises. So this is where it comes into, like, you got to have good prospect people, which there's tons of them out there. I try to get them on the show when I can, and we'll talk some of that stuff as well. And you kind of like I do a whole DC episode on the AL and the two separate episodes, and we legit go over like potential prospects. They're with prospect guys to see who's worth looking for in DCs because I have no clue. But I know Mydroth was mentioned, and in my my team by team previews, I know for a fact that the good doctor Mike Carter mentioned Chase Mydroth as the guy they wanted at shortstop over Montgomery to start the season because he was more ready. Now Montgomery did his thing, but Mydroth got a ton of at bats, and so like you just got to kind of, I guess, throw out the projections if you like prospects to your initial point, and then hope that the people that kind of pay more attention to it are accurate. Like Caleb Durbin is a guy, he was second on this list, Ben. He had 445 at bats. He was projected for 195. there was a point towards the end of spring training where Caleb Durbin was supposed to be the starting third baseman, and then that got real sketchy. And obviously, he missed some time with injury also, but he played, pretty well, all things considered. It got really good in the second half, but that's a guy that I think a lot of people he was probably one of the more drafted. Like he had an ADP of 403, Cam Smith behind him, but we knew he was starting. But like Caleb Durbin at least had an ADP in this range, and he still, didn't get more than 445 at bats. So it's nothing close to an exact science. Let's put it that way.
What was the second part of the question? Do you want to dive into the players, or do you want to because there's a couple that I want to bring up that were really interesting.
Okay. He says Ben Bingham says any takeaways from the 2025 prospect projections.
Okay, that's gonna be a lot. That's gonna be a longer question to answer, I think.
So, any takeaways from here? Like I said, my first one is no one had over 450 at bats, and in reality, there's only like 15 to 20 that had over 200. So it comes down to the age-old question: what are you drafting? I guess, right? Because if we're drafting for plate appearances, Ben, we're looking at bats for counting. If they're only getting between 2 to 450, and most are getting less than 200, are they really helping you?
Yeah, it also depends on when the at bats come.
True. Before your injuries or after your injuries on your DC?
Yeah, that too. Yeah, are they starting the season in the majors? Because the ADP is here from the main event, and there's the ones that on the list that are visible, at least for me, are Durbin, Cam Smith, Kurtz, Chandler Simpson, Drake Baldwin, Matt Shaw, the Max Muncy got straight up because there's two of them, but I think that's LA Max Muncy ADP. Roman Anthony was drafted. Kyle Teal was drafted at least once. Christian Campbell was supposed to make the team, and then Jack Caglianone was also had ADPs. But so I guess one of the people I wanted to mention was Matt Shaw, because if listeners remember, if you don't, one of the ways we're measuring the accuracy of the projections is there's the rank based on the Z-scores, which I calculated, and also there's the MAE, the mean absolute error, which is just taking the difference of the projected runs, homers, RBI, steals, and the weighted average, which I calculated to the Z-scores, and it's averaging the absolute value of those differences. And Shaw's MAE was 4, which is really, really close. And his line that was projected was 53 runs, 13 homers, 52 RBIs, 15 steals, and a roughly league average. His actuals were 57 runs, so 4 more, exactly the same number of homers, 13. He had 8 fewer RBIs at 44, and 2 more steals at 17. And he actually was a relatively poor average contributor compared to what the projections were saying. So, and the other thing on top of it was they were within 16 at bats of Matt Shaw's. They were within 16 of projecting what he actually got. So he had the stint in the minors, which I guess is a pretty probable outcome when you're talking about a rookie. So they accounted for that properly. This is as a reminder, it's Steamer, ATC, and the BATX that we're looking at for the projection. And they basically nailed his projection. So that's a very, and I guess you could argue it's because of the playing time, because a lot of the other guys have much higher MAEs around Matt Shaw. They're a lot obviously Kurtz was 45. He was the first one we talked about last week because of how much he destroyed the projection of basically nothing. But Chandler Simpson had a pretty high MAE of 23. Drake Baldwin, who we talked about last week, he had a 24 MAE. So I don't know. Before I mention the other guy, Bubba, I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with the other guy, but the Matt Shaw one is very telling because, like you said, not many of them project these guys well, let alone project for 409 at bats. Like that's definitely a big takeaway on that one for me, that they knew the playing time was there, the hype train was there, they made the adjustments for it, which was good because I think, to be fair, a lot of people probably knew about Matt Shaw, but until he blew up in the Arizona Fall League, then he was on like that Team USA. So that's when the rumbling started going, okay, he might actually be the starting third baseman going into spring training. And at least the projections kind of went with that, where you don't always get that, if that makes sense to anybody. Like there's always hype trains on all these prospects, but most of them don't follow the hype. They're just like, okay, no, he's not playing, or this is my projection. And if he plays more, whatever, to the point of almost everybody else on this list. But they bought into Matt Shaw being there, but also, as you said, baked in the minor league time / potential injury, which was quite telling. So yeah, they almost nailed it, which is very rare because there's only literally less than a handful of players that projected for over 200 at bats that they were actually very close on. when it comes to at bats. And I think you want to hit on the next one, is my assumption. But yeah, it's pretty telling. And one more thing, and I'll let you hit on that player. So there are a handful of players that do have ADPs here. Majority post 400. Majority, and then in that chunk, a lot of them are 450, which means the last pick, essentially. So it's just kind of dart throws in that regard. So ADP is a loose term with that. So yeah, it's telling that a lot of these people weren't even drafted in the main event, because I think, and this could be totally wrong, this is a whole nother exercise for a whole nother day. I just feel like, Ben, you could definitely answer this better than I can. I feel like in a main event, you could take your risky picks, but I think you still want your risky picks with playing time, like floors potentially. And most of these prospects, as we get going, aren't going to have them. I have a hunch if we looked at like even OCs, even though it's less picks in that draft, you might see more ADP plays, if that makes sense. We're like, okay, I'm going to take a shot and I'll just drop them or something. Maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But it's interesting to see the ADP when you consider most people don't take risks in those drafts.
Right. I think it's one of two It's one of two scenarios. Either you think they're going to open the season with the major league team, like Cam Smith, Durbin, Shaw, Drake Baldwin, or you're just stashing them. Who is the next guy I'm going to mention was like one of the main stashes, because he also had a higher ADP than a lot of these other guys too. So it's very interesting. But yeah, this to cap off the Shaw conversation. His ADP was 209, and he basically nailed his projection. So you're probably hoping for a better projection though at that point, you would assume, right? I that's why I didn't take Shaw in at all, because the projection was pretty underwhelming. So would you agree with that? Probably that Shaw was a loss.
Yeah, because I think when you're taking it with that ADP, you're seeing the projection, and it's the old adage. Now let's factor in like 200 more at bats if he plays every day. And now you're thinking, okay, now I got a guy, because I think I had one share in an OC late. I'm like, okay, he's basically got the job now, and I'm like, okay, we got a potential 2020 third baseman this late in the draft. If I'm using the projections, you know what I'm saying? Like that's a unicorn outside of J-Ram, basically. So like you don't see that every day, and obviously it didn't pan out. But if you're using projections and you start speculating, that's kind of where your brain goes. At least my brain goes.
Yeah, we're always optimistic with our picks.
Yes, we have to be. Honestly, if you're not optimistic with your pick, like there's a lot of picks like 2 rounds later, like why did I do that? That's fine. But if you're not optimistic in the moment, oof, that's not a good look.
No, you probably need a new hobby.
Yep. All right, who's the other player you want to mention? I have a hunch who it is.
Yeah, it's Roman Anthony.
Yes.
Yeah, he stands out because he was also within 50 at-bats of his projection, and he had a MAE of 5, so almost as accurately projected as Matt Shaw was. But the thing is, well, compared to Shaw, Anthony was like 100 picks later in ADP. He was roughly 315 if you average it, if you round up. But he was projected as hitter 248, and he finished as hitter 208, which is okay. But he was projected for 40 runs. Roman had 48. They nailed the homers again, 8-8. Projected for 35 RBIs, had 32. So that's basically spot on. 7 steals versus 4 in reality. And this is where he really stood out, Roman. He was projected for slightly below average, but he was very helpful there. I don't have the actual number here, but it's a pretty high number on the weighted average for him having only 208 actual, or 206. Where is he? I lost my spot.
He hit 292. He hit 292.
Yeah. Yep. So he had a pretty good average contribution to limited playing time, Anthony. And yeah, he's a stash. So you basically were hoping for half a season. And I don't think Anthony really was dropped anywhere, because I think once he got called up, there wasn't a lot of adding happening in the main event the following week. And 315 is a pretty early pick to have for someone who had okay stats. Granted, they were pretty good with the projection, but the projection wasn't that good to begin with. So he basically played half a year, 257 at-bats. And if you double that, it's like 16 homers and 8 steals. Pretty good run pace, and the average was good. So it wasn't like awful, but the opportunity cost, I think, of taking him at pick 315, then stashing for whatever it was, 2.5 months till he got called up, is probably not the best way to go. And at DC, it's different because you can draft depth after that at outfield. But if you have injuries early in the season, then you're kind of screwed, because one of your outfielders that you kind of need at any time isn't there available for you. So that's not a perfect scenario either. So I just thought that Anthony being very accurately projected was also kind of interesting too.
It's interesting to the point is he didn't start like you said. You had to stash him. Then he starts out rough. So did you hold him? Because I ended up getting a share in a 12 later for people that dropped him. Then there's also he started playing really well. Those are his numbers, and he missed like the last 2 months of the year, so he could have shattered the projection. Like there's always the what if game, but to your point, yeah, they nailed the projection. He just happened to fit the at bats in there, and so he'll be another one. Will be interesting. What are they projecting for in 2026? Now that he should quote unquote have a full run of at bats when you look at Roman, because do they use the same kind of per at bat rates as you mentioned? A question for you before we maybe look at some other guys here. It was something that kind of got brought up in last episode, talking about the guys that over achieved well because they had more at bats. Essentially, um, you're talking about Steamer 600 in that regard. Would you do it for any prospects? Because I think the biggest thing with prospects is when do they get called up. So the 600 still gives you the per rates just in a full season idea instead of what they're projecting. But I don't know if it helps as much as it does for like last week's episode.
Yeah, I guess a good example would be like Hunter Goodman. He had flashes of time in the majors already, and the rookies, you're kind of just creating a MLB projection from their minor league numbers. So I don't know if I would be as confident in the Steamer 600 as confident as I could be with the other guys, like we mentioned last week, Ben Rice, who had already been called up. So I don't think it would hurt though to take a look at the rate stats. It's just a matter of, well, you're kind of hoping, okay, if they are someone who's making the club out of spring training, will they stick? But then if they're stashed, how long, to your point, how long until they're actually in the majors, and will they even do well? So I think there's a couple more questions if we want to use Steamer 600 with rookies.
Agreed. It's almost like I'm looking at some of these, and we were talking about the MAE, and how like with Matt Shaw, it was at a 4, Romans is at a 5, so still pretty darn good if you think about it for prospects. I'm wondering, like, do we consider like the 8 for Mydroth pretty good, all things considered? I know it's a bigger gap, so in your statistical mind, probably not because it's just against the rules. But if we're talking prospects, like that's still getting close in my book of like, hey, they were in the ballpark. He just far like 200 more at bats. We have, let's say, Edgar Caro. He's another like 220 more at bats. You go down to Kyle Teal. Look at all these White Sox, by the way. See, Kyle Teal only had like 80 more at bats, and he still like outproduced his projected ranking of 388 by 151 spots, finished 237 at the position, largely due to batting average and counting stats. But again, it was only 80 at bats compared to 200, I guess. So obviously, maybe there's more to unravel, but I'm just kind of like throwing out ideas.
Well, with the Mydroth example, I would say that the MAE being that close isn't that good in his case, because the homers and RBIs were basically spot on, and he had 200 more at bats than what he was projected for. So I would take that. I would say that's kind of a negative, and it's kind of talking about. Actually, no, he was the example we mentioned with the playing time being way out of whack compared to the projection. So, yeah, sure, he had more steals, Mydroth, but okay, well, I hope he did because he had 200 more at bats, and then the average wasn't far off. So I guess so the numbers are numbers, but they kind of have they can tell a story too if you look at them.
There's even a handful of guys on this that don't even have a projection, which is hilarious to me. So it just tells you they weren't even on the radar for these guys. As like Dalen Lyle, who was a fab darling for like the last month and a half or so of the season, not even a projection, folks. Not even one. So it goes to show you that even the projections are out on prospects until proven otherwise, that we can all be fooled by that. Anybody else on this you'd like to discuss? I think it's a good exercise to prove that the projections are really never going to be interested in prospects is my biggest takeaway, which we kind of already knew, but it is interesting that they did nail, I guess, the 2 that we expected to play, the 2 of the few that we expected to play the most. They got those pretty accurate.
Yeah, definitely. Cam Smith, he had a 13 MAE. He was near the top of actual at bats. He's only projected for 212. He had 441, so he doubled his projection in terms of playing time, and only had 2 more homers. Of course, he doubled the runs and he doubled the runs and RBIs. Excuse me. So that's kind of to be expected, but the power wasn't really there for him. And we mentioned Simpson last week, Chandler Simpson, Walden. They appeared. So yeah, at this point, there's a lot of the guys that. Well, actually, here's one. Colson Montgomery. he was projected for 8 homers and 309 at bats. He had 21 and 255. What do you do with that?
Oof. Yeah. I love Colson. That's 54 fewer at bats, and he had 13 more home runs, but only 9 more runs. Like you'd expect a lot more there. And no steals. They projected for 3. That's real tricky to your point of what do you do with that? We've talked about him on other shows. His swing and miss is not to be desired right now. So he's going to start every day. That'll be a very interesting projection to see in the next couple of weeks when Steamer usually comes out. So
right,
for sure.
Yep, and no speed from a middle infielder, so that also hurts.
Yeah, that's like a Corey Seager prototype, but no batting average. It's even worse. So we'll see where that plays. Maybe he plays 150 games though, so that could change things. All righty, let's Straface 23. Ben Rice, who we talked about last week, I believe. Right? We talked about him last week? Pretty sure we did.
We did, I think, yeah.
All right, so then this one has to come up. It's been mentioned a few times in the Discord there. Just got taken in the 50, as John Wilder said that I'm in with the boys. Anthony Volpe. Ben, let's talk Anthony Volpe here, because why not? He was the projected 88th hitter, according to the projections. Finished at 128 to 40 pick differential. Projected for our 40 spot differential. 547 projected at bats, had 539, Ben. So pretty close to where we are there. I'm going to leave it at that. I'll let you have the floor here. What are your thoughts when we look at this projection? Because it's also one, when you look at Anthony Volpe, he had an MAE of 9, so not great, but he fell into our at-bat metric.
Right, yeah. I think it was pretty good. I think a 9's okay for the MAE. We were getting swelled with those 4s and 5s, but it really, for me, it's the average with him. Yeah, he almost went 2020 Volpe, but he had a minus 18 weighted average, and he hit like 217, I think, or 220. I think 220 is high for Volpe this year. So at 539 at bats, I dealt with average issues in my main event. That did really well this year, and having someone who I have no confidence in can hit for average right off the bat is like kind of a no-go for me. And his ADP was 145 Volpe last year. I had him ranked like closer to 200 just because I had 0 confidence. I want to like him. I feel like I am the leader of the Anthony Volpe hate club, at least in the Discord I am. It's because this, from watching him play, like his calling card was supposed to be his defense this year, and even that was terrible. It could be because the hitting was getting into his head, or maybe his shoulder was hurting that much where it was affecting his fielding. I don't know. It's a different shoulder, but it could still hurt. So the power gains, he hit 5 more homers Volpe than he was projected for, 19 compared to 14. But the other thing that hurts too is that he hits in the bottom of the lineup for the Yankees. He's not going to hit in the top half anytime soon. There could be a leadoff opening next year, but I doubt he's going to get it because his career OPS is like below 650 and his on base for his career is less than 300. He's like a bad hitter in general. And the thing that saves him in fantasy is that he gets steals. And for me, I don't think the steals are worth it. And I think that's why the projected hitter rank of 88 was as high as it was, because they projected him for being slightly below average and average, but having 25 steals, which is probably one of the higher projected totals. But it's not enough for me to want to draft him anytime soon. It's all depending on his price, of course, but people tend to love Volpe, I think, because of the Yankee tax. But if you were to watch him and see what his stat line actually is, it's pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, he just went at pick 349 in the draft I'm in.
That's much different than 145.
Yes, exactly what I'm saying. It's like people are like, once we get like real ADPs and stuff, I don't see that taking place. But I think people are so turned off by that batting average this year, they're scared. I just kind of if I'm going to look at that glass half full, he nearly went 2020 with that batting average. Like, if he could somehow hit, let's say 245, 250, like how could he? What, talking 25, 25, 25, 30? Like, there's a lot to like there with Volpe, but I understand all of the frustrations. So I'm just trying to play glass half full for a second there to see.
And everybody's out on O'Neal Cruz. He hit 200 with 2030.
Yeah, you still got to pay for him though, a little bit more.
It's a different price, but
yeah, it's a different price. O'Neal Cruz. Okay, well, we're gonna go side trip here. He feels like it's an attitude thing for me, and I don't know how you fix that. Where Volpe was legit hurt, and not to mention all the rumblings in that town has to affect what's going on between your ears. So there's a couple factors with Volpe that I don't know if you can fix them, but I'm at least more interested where I just don't think O'Neal Cruz cares. Like there's a difference.
He needs a
And
trade.
again, he needs to get out of Pittsburgh, which honestly, I don't blame the guy, but you kind of have to deal with the hand you're dealt for the time being.
Right, he's playing for a contract eventually, so you don't want to hurt your future earnings.
Potential suitors might not like that at all. All right, we have another one. Brendan Donovan was discussed here. Brendan Donovan was a guy that I was out on all draft season because it's just a block. Like he's a good real life player. Brendan Donovan, when we look at projections, was the 119th projected hitter, finished at 138. He was projected for 484 at bats. He had 460, 64 runs, nailed the 12 homers, hit 10. Projected 59 IRS, had 50. Six stolen bases at 3. He outperformed already projected for a high batting average, outperformed that because Brendan Donovan, he did hit 287 in his 118 games, missed time on the IL. But again, for me, like I see the profile, 10 homers, 64, 53. That's pretty much been what he does year in and year out. And again, good real life. The projections nailed it for the most part, but just doesn't do it for me when it comes to fantasy.
Yeah, there's no ceiling with Donovan, and at pick 261 in the main event, he kind of projected to be okay at that range, hitter 120, but roughly 120. So even though there's no upside with him, and the average is nice, but I don't think it's worth it. I guess he's like a version of Luis Arias, where you're not going to get a lot of counting stats, but the average should be okay. Pretty good though to see the playing time pretty much nailed 484 to 460, and the MAE of 4 is really good as well. So Donovan's a pretty easy one to project. Kind of like when we talked about the other boring guys in the first episode, we talked this topic. So yeah, I think I had a note either this year or last year saying don't draft him because what are you going to get out of him? It's gonna, I don't know. There's really nothing. There's no upside at all with Donovan, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember on my Cardinals preview with Matt Thompson, didn't have a whole lot of good things to say. Well, about most of the team, but especially Brendan Donovan just wasn't. It's vanilla as vanilla can get, pretty much with Brendan Donovan. The last player that Straface 23 mentioned is Matty Chapman, and this is a good one to the third base preview on last week with Ryan on Bubba and the Bloom. And Chapman stands out once again. He did not make the batting the plate at bats requirement here, unfortunately, but he was projected to be the 55th hitter, finished 117, projected for 534 at bats, had 454. So we missed out about 80 at bat differential there due to the IL stints. But we did see Chapman projected for 78 runs, got 76, 26 homers, hit 21, 79 RBIs, had 61. So big drop off there. Stolen bases 8 to 9, so that's fair. Batting average took a bit of a dip. This was a tough. He was actually projecting pretty well throughout the season for the most part. Then the injuries kind of derailed things. What are your thoughts when you look at Matt Chapman here, who obviously, due to the lack of at bats, didn't meet his projection, but still has 6 MAE, missing 80 at bats isn't the end of the world, I think.
No, he was pretty close. It's really just the lack of RBIs that really killed his rank from being 55th hitter projected to 117th in actuality. So I don't think it was. I was kind of hesitant of drafting Chapman at that point. I had him ranked kind of around there, but it just never felt right to me to actually draft him then. So I didn't take him any teams, and the steals were pretty nice. I think he had a lot more last year in 2024, but 9 is still pretty good for a third baseman. It's just with him, it's the average is always going to be. It could easily the bottom could drop out of that, and it didn't drop out that much this year, but it definitely was. It came in lower than we were projecting him for. And 5 homers isn't a lot. I think if he got the extra playing time, he probably gets those 5 extra homers or gets close, and then maybe the RBIs get pretty close as well. Maybe gets half of the 18 he was missing, and it's not really that big of a miss on the projections, but like you point out, it's the at bats were off, and he suffered because of it.
All right. Twitter questions. I just noticed this player's not on the sheet, so we won't discuss him, but we can figure it out later at another date and time. One to potentially look at with this the prospect sheet we had. I'm looking here. Sal Stewart did not have a projection. Sal Stewart was asked by Hank Moody, wants to know about Sal Stewart's 2026 outlook. He did not have a projection. Ended up getting 55 at bats. This is one of your guys late in the year, by the way.
Yep.
11 runs, 5 homers, 8 RBIs, hit for an okay average. But again, no preseason projections. Kind of tough to see where that goes. But what's your 2026 outlook for Sal Stewart?
So I'm actually looking at roster resource for depth charts. I looked at it for the Giants with Ramos, just out of curiosity, and now here I am on the Reds. They have him being the DH right now, and there's
Which
a
would be
lot of
nice.
things that can happen. What was that, Bubba?
I said it would be nice if he was.
Yes, it would be. That way you fit and steer. They can stop playing Gavin Lux. I don't know why he deserves to play. That's just a mess. Yes, and Marte would be in the lineup in this scenario. They could even call up if they got rid of Lux. They could even call up Christian Encarnacion Strand. So I think because they gave Stewart playing time at the end of the year, and this is even having Hayes in the lineup too, which is interesting as well. I think Stewart could have a shot at playing time, but unless the Reds like to make these weird signings though, because like when they signed Heimer Candelero a year or two ago, it didn't really make sense because they had so many options already. But then they all got hurt, so it didn't really matter. But I think Stewart, if he was late enough in a DC, it's a solid pick. I think for right now, we have to get a lot more information before I can really tell or provide a pretty good outlook for next year.
Yeah, agreed. He makes it pretty tricky when it comes to that whole scenario because the Reds do like to fumble and mess with a ton of their roster in season. So totally agree with you on that one. And as John Wilder says, I only draft Reds in I have a lot of Red shares so far this early. They're free. They're free right now. I can't figure it out. What are your thoughts on it? Or no, never mind. Dog stopped for a second there, so we're good. All right. So the other we had a question after last episode. Governor of Givener has a question. He said it's for the part 3 show, so perfect. He said in the 5 NFBC 15-team drafts he did this season, about 75% of his hitter picks performed below projections based on player rater. Just wondering what percentage of hitters who had a 450 plate appearance or more underperformed their projections.
All right, so I had to take a little time before the show kicked off to get this prepared, but by my Z-scores, I found that 45% of the hitters underperformed their projection, and those that had 450 plus at bats. So there on my sheet, there were 143 players that had 450 plus at bats, 64 underperformed projections, 79 did better than projection. So, and that's 45-55 split. So basically 50-50 if you're being very general about it.
So we have a 50-50 chance to draft a good player based on projections. That is so literally, I could flip a coin. Is that what I'm getting out of this?
Kind of. And if anyone wants to read my article, Ryan appropriately picked the title saying that we stink at drafting. So, and I can go into all the details about that. Where I do go to all the details about that if you're curious. So
it's just interesting. It's just interesting because we've been talking about projections for 3 episodes now. And we started out talking about like how accurate these projections were. And then it turns out now, and then you also, obviously, you buffered out all the rookies, basically, that over exceeded that, or not even as rookies, just guys that got hurt, whatever, didn't meet the 450 plate appearances. So the ones we talked about in episode 2, most of them don't meet the criteria you're discussing right now. So it's literally the guys that we projected or that were projected for 450 plate appearances actually got there. We still screw up half the time. It's pretty good.
I'll say, so the way I did this, because I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for this question, was I just went off of I looked at the difference in their projected rank as a hitter versus the actual rank. But because of injuries, it doesn't necessarily mean that if a hitter finished better in the hitter ranks, that they actually beat their projection. Because I forget who it was. I think it was Ramos. Like, he was a much better hitter, but he didn't really beat his projection by all that much because he didn't really hit the rate stats we were talking about. Like, he had as many homers and 100 plus more at bats, but he finished like 40 spots higher, I think, in the hitter rankings. So It's not a full 50. It's probably is 50 in reality, but on a per player case, there may be scenarios where this depletion of the player pool kind of boosts up a player's ranking, even though the projection could be pretty accurate still.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting to hear it out loud that it's literally potentially a coin toss when we're doing this. It's just, again, it's not completely because again, some players will get more at bats or not meet the criteria because of injuries. We don't know that when we're drafting, but yeah, it's pretty shocking to hear that number.
Well, I know
Uh,
you. I know you know who this guy is, Pat Mayo. So I listened to
yes,
his betting show, even though I don't bet on the NFL. I just think it's hilarious, and it's
it's
just
entertaining. It's very
oh,
entertaining.
it's like 2 to 3 hours of entertainment. If anyone doesn't listen to Pat Mayo Experience, listen to the show with Jeff Feinberg and Tim Anderson. It's
Yes.
hilarious. It's a Wednesday tradition for me during the season. But he literally tracks the coin. It's the fourth member of the show. He flips a coin every time they go over a game, and the coin half the time does better than they do. So it's the exact same thing as trying to project what's going to happen. You don't really know.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, freshly out of college, living with two of my buddies in town here. We'd always have people over to barbecue and watch football and do things that 24-year-olds do on Sundays, not caring about work on Monday. And we legit had it was on the mantle. The coin is what we named it, and it was the coin. So if we were ever sitting there, we couldn't agree on a bet to make as the group. The coin was the tiebreaker every time, and it had quite the record. To your point, it was pretty dead on. But we had that coin literally. It just sat there. Nobody stole it. No one. They knew what it was. It was the coin. You just leave it there, and it comes out in case it's like break glass in case of emergency. The coin does come out, and that was used a lot over about a 2 to 3 year span during football seasons. Yes. It's funny how that works. We don't. Bottom line, back to your article. We don't know much about anything. Just the reality of it. All right. Before we wrap up here, we got a little more time. We were talking before the show. I wanted to hit on a few. Like we left off last week, talking about the players that quote unquote overachieved, but most of them didn't have the at bat metrics. They did well to the projection because they had more at bats. But like George Springer was one of the only guys we talked about that was within 50 at bats, and he obviously crushed it. The next up, we didn't mention him, would have been Aaron Judge. Don't think we have to break into that analysis much, Ben. But we'll go over a few more here just to kind of give people an idea on where projections did well technically or maybe didn't. We'll see. But because playing time is the king in a lot of these deeper leagues, so you want to be able to trust playing time and projections per se. So the next one after Aaron Judge was Taylor Ward, a player that piques our interest. We kind of I think we talked off air about him last week, going, "Wow, he hit 36 home runs last year." Yes, he did. Taylor Ward was the 58th projected hitter, finished 56th at the position, projected for 549 at bats. Taylor Ward had 579. He had projected for 79 runs, had 86, 23 home runs, hit 36, 72 RBIs, had 103 RBIs. Batting average destroyed him, but he still did very well. He, again, finishing 56. So what are your thoughts when you look at a guy like Taylor Ward, who just crushed the power metrics? Batting average destroyed him, but the plate appearances were pretty spot on.
Yeah, and he's pretty interesting as well, Ward, because you mentioned he was 2 spots off in the rankings based on what he was projected for and what actually happened. And the MAE was kind of high compared to the other guys we mentioned, but previously it was 13 for Ward, which isn't terrible, but it's up there compared to the 4s and the 5s. And you mentioned it in the stats when you're reading them off. It's because he did so much better in homers and RBIs, but it's so much worse in average. So they kind of counteracted each other. But when you look at the MAE, because the difference at each individual stat was so great for those 3 categories, he kind of he was like you didn't really get what you were asking for with Ward. If you needed power, okay, that was a great find. But if you wanted his solid average, he kind of hurt you there. So I guess it all really comes down to how your other players did when it comes to Ward, because yeah, he probably earned a pretty similar dollar value to what he was projected for, but how he got there was not what you were expecting necessarily.
Yeah, he got there in a much different way. Like I was drafting him for power, not expecting that. At the same time, I'm glad he did, because if he didn't and hit for that bad average, we would have had problems on our hands. So you kind of deal with what you got. Gunnar Henderson's the next name I'm going to bring up here, Ben. Gunnar Henderson, because just a lot of reasons is he worth the first round pick discussions that are out there? There's he started the year hurt, and then he finished relatively well, especially on the base paths out of nowhere. Gunnar Henderson was a 13th projected hitter, finished 39th at the position. He was projected for 558 at bats. He got 577 though, which was big. Now, what got him is projected for 97 runs, only scored 85. This is where it really gets good. Projected for 31 home runs, Ben. He only hit 17. 87 RBIs projected, only at 68. So the power numbers dropped dramatically. But I said earlier, the steals, 16 projected steals, got 30, and still hit for a really good batting average. Gunner's one of those guys I don't know what to do with. We had back-to-back power seasons, then a little bit of power and speed last year, and then no real, like minimal power and tons of speed this year. Really confused on Gunnar Henderson.
Yeah, I think I had him in the first round still when we did a mock draft of the first round. I did have Gunnar on 2 teams. I was very optimistic with the injury recovery from his oblique, and I think that just kind of didn't ruin his season because he still was relatively productive. It's just that it kind of sapped his power. His barrel rate did drop almost 3 percentage points from 2024. He had almost the exact same exit velocity, which is pretty good. It was over 92 miles per hour for Gunnar. The XBA was still good. The xWOBA definitely dropped. The hard hit wasn't that far off. It was only down by like 4%, maybe 4.5% for Gunnar. So it's tough. I think I'll be in on the bounce back. I don't think people are going to, because I think one of the things with Gunnar going into last year was he had a big first half, I think, in 2024, and then he kind of slowed down in the second half. But that projected stat line you read off of almost 30-20 with almost 100 runs and a good average and almost 90 RBIs, that's a great line. It's a line that I would love to draft. So if I can get Gunnar in the mid to late second round, I don't know if that's where he's going to be in drafts. That's kind of where he was going into 2024, actually. He was around that point in the draft. I would be all in on him again. But it's good to see the extra steals. Like, he has it in him to steal 30 bags, and if he can go 30-30, then he's a first rounder.
Yeah, in the 50s I'm in right now, he was the 5th pick of round 2. So
that's pretty early still.
Yeah, so he's still getting up there right now. I want to talk about Josh Naylor because everyone's talking about Josh Naylor's speed this year. Well, he didn't have speed; his steals, I should say. Josh Naylor was the 52nd projected hitter. He finished 18th at projection hitters. He was projected for 71 runs, scored 81, 21 homers, hit 20, so pretty good so far. 83 runs, RBIs 92, 7 steals projected, hit at 30 steals, Ben. And he's projected for above average. He crushed his batting average, and he did so with 543 at bats, projected for 519. Ben, so like he didn't have a large gap in the projection, and he just throttled it. Like, he was pretty close to the runs, RBIs, and homers for the most part. Just steals and batting average blew it out of the water.
Yeah, and he's someone who's really had his profile change a lot over the last few years because Naylor had. In 2022, he had 20 homers, 6 steals, 256 average. Then he had 17 homers, 10 steals, but a 308 average. And then in 2024, his average dropped 60 points, but he gained 14 homers and lost 4 steals. And then now this year, he lost 10 homers and gained 24 steals, and he hit 300 again. So who knows what you're going to get out of Josh Naylor. He's kind of like how Ian Happ used to be on the Cubs, because Happ would always be kind of good, but we never knew if he was a steal or hit for average or hit for power. And now Naylor's kind of turned into that guy, oddly enough, it feels like. So at 105, yeah, he was a very profitable pick, Naylor.
Yeah,
and I'm
very good.
Yeah, if I did a player analysis for the article, I'm sure he would have stood out as one of the big hits, just because of the steals and the average. If you're getting 30 steals and a good average like that for your first baseman, it's massive. But I would not bank on 30 steals from Naylor when I'm drafting next year.
As I would say, I could see him hitting for a decent average again. Like you said, he's done it before. That steals, like, that's tough. Like, that feels like the Matt Chapman 2024 all over again. Now, anything's possible, but it seems very, very tricky. Let's talk Bo Bichette, because there's a lot of people that aren't sold on Bo Bichette. I'm slowly getting there, but still not, at least for fantasy. But he was projected to be the 53rd hitter this past year. Bichette finished as the 32nd hitter in baseball, which is solid, especially missing time with the knee injury. Bichette was projected for 74 runs, scored 78. Projected for 16 homers, hit 18. This is where he started to stand out, folks. projecting 68 RBIs, 94 RBIs. Now, projected for 10 steals, had 4. That's always been his problem. And he blew his batting average projection out of the water as Bo Bichette hit 311 this past season. So average was great. RBIs phenomenal, which led Bo Bichette to having a great season and kind of beating the projections quite well.
Yeah, I'm looking at his career stats over the first career act. That's why they're his career stats. And he's kind of like a cheaper version of Corey Seager, where
that's fair.
He's hit like 300 now. No speed. I think the steals are out of the question. We're never seeing 25 again, that's for sure. And I doubt we see double digits from Bichette anymore. But he's Corey Seager like because of the power. He's more like a 20 homer hitter, where Seager's like a 30 homer hitter. And relying on the big average is kind of scary for me and you can have a bad year, whether it's BABIP or K rate or whatever. And if Bichette's like a 270 hitter with 20 homers and 80 runs, 90 RBIs, and no steals, is he going to be worth that pick? So it's tricky with him. He definitely was a profitable pick this year, just by the ranking 32 versus projected of 53. So, and then he's hurt now with the knee again. He's had injuries with other legs. Yeah, he only has 2 other parts of his legs in the past, Bichette. So he's barely able to play in the World Series right now. And of course, he'll have the full offseason to heal, but he's definitely going to be risky if he moves up higher than his 109 ADP, I think.
Most definitely. I'm with you on that. A guy that I've also been fading pretty religiously is Fernando Tatis Jr. He was the 9th projected hitter, finished 16th at the positions. This is where it's one of those like, hey, he still wasn't that bad, all things considered. He is projected for 545 at-bats at 594. Now, to me, a couple things already. If I'm drafting a first-round player, I want more than 594 at-bats, kind of where my head begins to go. He was projected for 94 runs, scored 111. That's good. 32 home runs, only hit 25, though. That's a bummer. 87 RBIs projected, only had 71. Projected for 20 steals, had 32, though. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, he hit for a good average, scored a lot of runs, stole bags, but he wasn't doing the other parts you'd expect from a first-round pick. So when you look at Tatis, this is like one of the first years in a while where he played. This is the most games he's ever played in his career, 155 for one. Only the second time he's had over 600 plate appearances in his career. Where are you at on his when it comes to Tatis? Because even the projections were off because he seemed like a different player. He seemed like a completely different player than they projected for, basically.
Yeah, they kind of just like he rearranged the numbers from where they had him projected for. Like he took some of the RBIs and put them into his runs, and then switched the homers and the steals. But otherwise, he was the hitter 16 Tatis. I think I also had him in the first round when we did our projected first round for next year.
Yep.
So what's the earliest that you would take Tatis? Because I know you've been a downer.
I think last year was a middle to late second round pick in a 12. Like, I'm fine taking that profile then, I guess. It still doesn't make me feel – I might have even been an early third round, to be honest. I remember he fell. Like, okay, now I'm taking Fernando Tatis because he fell. I would not take him in the first round. You will not see him in a first round of any of my drafts. I don't want to make dumb wagers that people make on podcasts, but I guarantee you he will not be a first round pick for me ever.
I could be a beer bet for you and Ryan at some point.
Yeah, it's one I'll automatically win because I will not do it. I can control the outcome of that. That's easy.
Yes.
Yeah, I will not be taking him in the first round of any draft I have this season.
Yeah, that's fair. He still had a really great line last year. I don't know.
That's why when I look at it, like, this is why I like talking about this kind of stuff before we go full on into 2026. Like, we're obviously going that direction, but the line's good enough for, like, okay, second round, I'm cool. I think more of it with Tatis is, do I trust him to play? Like, that's the concern. And people that draft him in the first round, I think they still think they're getting that like 30-plus home run guy. And I just don't know if he exists anymore with all the injuries. And Ryan made a great point on our outfield preview on Thursday night. You look at the big year that Tatis had in, what was it there, 2021? You know what happened the next year, right, Ben?
That was a shoulder in the suspension, right?
Yeah, the PED suspension. Yeah. So since the PED suspension, still a good ball player. I'm not going to downgrade that. But longevity and not to mention the power is gone. Like, you look at his barrel rate. He had 21% barrel rate in 2021. Best he's had is 14.5, which is still good, but it's mostly around 11, which is still not bad. But my point is, it's not the guy I think people hoped he was going to be.
He's going to be 27. He almost went 30-30 this year. He's batting leadoff for the Padres ahead of Manny, Merrill, clean the sheets. I'm joking with that one. But yeah, so I think now that he's hitting leadoff, they have to adjust the runs and homers based on what he's projected for. But I think he's a very solid second-round pick. I think he should go near the turn in a 15-teamer, I think.
That's fine. That's fine. Like I guess the second round is much more because you know who he's starting to remind me of, especially if he leads off and we see the run production go up like this. We see the stolen base go up and he still hits like 25 homers. He might be the modern day Mookie Betts, which is pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. I'm not going to knock that.
He reminds me a lot of Gunnar, who we already talked about.
Okay, that's fair. Gunner's a guy I don't take in the first round either. So it's like I have my types. That's the problem.
Yeah. They were projected for very similar lines, and they ended up with very similar lines. It's actually kind of weird how close they were. They flipped the homers and the runs. Homers, yeah. Of course, I like both. I think they're intriguing picks, and yeah, you don't like either one. But that we can't always agree on everything.
No, so and the thing is, at least I'm growing on Tatis. It's good we don't agree, yes. But like in the 50 I'm in right now, just to kind of keep my the blood flowing for draft season. Tatis was the 10th pick in round 2.
So, oh, that's a great steal.
Yeah, and that team paired him up with the first round pick of Bobby Witt Jr. So that's a pretty
nice God.
Start. That's a nice start.
That's beautiful.
Like Gunnar Henderson went with the 5th pick in round 2. So yeah, but like
I might prefer Tatis over Henderson.
I think I would too. I would Tatis over Henderson. But like for instance, 3 picks before Tatis was my pick, and I took Jackson Chourio.
That's your guy.
Yeah, I know. So it's like maybe I shouldn't. The more we talk about Tatis in the second round, maybe I should take that profile. But because Chourio's not the spitting image of health either with the hamstrings. But yeah, it's a tough profile. I get Tatis. I should probably be more interested than I am. That's again why I like having these conversations with you and the others. It's just like look at the RBIs. He's never even had a 100 RBI season. This is his first 100-run season. Like he had 99 in his steroid season. I just look at everything and I'm like, he's still very good, but he's not a first-round talent. And maybe ADP won't have him there this year, so it won't even be a topic of conversation. But in recent years, he has still been a first-round pick, and that was never in the cards for me.
Yeah, I think second is much better. And the RBI is hurt because he's hitting leadoff in the bottom of the Padres lineup isn't very good. So there's not a lot of guys on for him when it comes around, I'm sure.
And to be fair, like if you look at the draft board, it's like Kyle Tucker went right before him. Would you go Tucker or Tatis? Let's just have some fun.
I'm still Tucker over Tatis, yeah.
So there you go. Jazz Chisholm or Tatis?
Oh, man. I'd go Tatis for the average.
Because Jazz went 2 picks before him. Right after Tatis was Trey Turner. Sorry,
definitely not Justin Turner. I would take Tatis over Trey Turner.
Okay, so let's just play with some more. You probably would take Tatis over Kurtz. I'm pretty sure. You take him over Henderson. Would you go Lindor or Tatis?
I think I had Lindor ahead of Tatis when we did the first round.
So roundabout way here. I'm not going to go over every first round pick, but that was like the next 6 picks in the second round that went before Tatis. There's only one you would take him over.
Yeah, and I said that he's like a turn pick in the 15. So yeah, I think he's
that's about right. Yeah, so that's about right with what you're saying. But that's also kind of like my conversation with Tatis which is hard. Another reason why it's hard to take him. So really, there's so many good hitters that have like quote unquote a better track record right now than Tatis.
And I know. Well, obviously we didn't do the second round when we did the first round draft. But I remember looking at the players and I go, there's not a lot of guys who I think are standout second round hitters either. So I think that kind of by default, that kind of just shifts Tatis up for me more than maybe, I don't know. I'll have to really look when projections come out and stuff, and I do my deep dives. But it's just on the surface right now. I think he's still a pretty good pick. But yeah, we have to turn the expectations down because of the lack of PEDs and whatever happened with the shoulder.
No, it's just a good conversation to be had. So I appreciated having the listeners enjoy that as well, because hopefully we'll have more back and forth like that throughout the draft season. Because that's it's even good. It's not so much of no, this guy's like horrible. I'm not even like Corey Seager. I'm never going to draft. Like he's never going to be on my team. But like Tatis, at least I can be open minded enough to be like, okay, Ben, I see your point. Like, but let's try to meet in the middle here if we can and see where it goes. So that hopefully we'll find more players. Because I think that'll help both of us and hopefully the listeners as we get ready for 2026. But we'll wrap it up there. I'm going to keep playing with that projection sheet throughout this offseason because there's some more really cool names on that board that played pretty well, but I don't know, projections, they're good, but apparently, as we just found out, 50% of the time they're good. So, which is crazy to think about because they are very, very good, but it just goes to show you that baseball is one of the most unpredictable games you can find out there. And we're trying to do that 162 games a year. With that said, Ben, any final thoughts as we wrap up part 3 of the projections? We'll move on to other topics heading towards draft season.
I'll say it's always fun these shows are always fun when we do the projection review. And I think and we didn't really have a solid plan for tonight's show, but I think it ended up being a pretty enjoyable one either way. So
strategy, projections, players, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'll go back and listen like I usually do, and hopefully that Tatis debate sounds pretty good.
I think it does. Like at least we hashed out like the good, the bad, the uglies, and maybe it's not as bad as I want him to be. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
but we'll wrap it up there.
20 anymore.
No, that's the biggest takeaway. I want people get that out of your minds, folks. Like that, those days are gone. But with that being said, check out Ben on Twitter at BreakingBen_T. He's a big part of the Patreon as well. We're there in the Discord and the written content as well. But the Bubba and the Loom Patreons, go check that out. You can find me on Twitter at BDintric. Until next time, this was Bench with Bubba, episode 789. Catch y'all later.